First, let's start with this case. I, 28, and my husband, 27M, are expecting a baby soon. My parents live close by, while his mom is a few states away. I have a good relationship with his mom, but we aren't very close. It's mostly polite conversations when she visits. I'm happy for her to visit as soon as the baby is born. Since it's hard to predict the exact date, we plan to call her and my sister, who also lives out of state, when I go into labor. They know they're welcome to book a flight right away or wait until after the birth. Whatever works for them. I recently told my husband I didn't want anyone staying overnight at our house for the first few days after birth. He seemed surprised but supported me, and we agreed to let everyone know. I told my mom first, explaining family is welcome to visit all day and into the evening, but I wanted the first few nights to bond as a family and adjust without overnight guests. This is our first and likely only baby, and I want to treasure those moments. I also explained that while I appreciate people wanting to help, having guests, even well-meaning ones, can be overwhelming. I have a lot of social anxiety / a low social battery and expect to feel exhausted and vulnerable after birth. Not to mention both our mothers have no problem telling us what we are doing wrong and how we should be doing things. My mom to me and his mom to him. I suspect it might be hard having people over all day when I am that tired and emotionally vulnerable right after giving birth. But I understand grandparents wanting to be around the baby right away, and having some time to ourselves at night felt like a good compromise. My mom understood and offered for my mother-in-law to stay at her house, which has a comfortable guest room. We also offered to pay for a nice waterside hotel, giving her 2 options. When my husband explained this to his mom, she became upset and said if she couldn't stay with us, she wouldn't come at all. This response threw me off. We've always hosted her before, even though having guests makes me anxious. I've never said no because she's family and I feel I should get over my anxiety, but I feel the first few days after birth are different. My husband is supportive and says it's my decision, but I know he wants her to come. I want that too, for her to meet her grandchild and for my husband's sake. But her reaction has left me feeling anxious and panicked about labor all of the sudden. I'm torn. If I give in, I worry I'll feel overwhelmed and resentful, affecting the experience and weeks left leading up to it. If I don't, I'm afraid it will hurt my relationship with her and disappoint my husband, even though it's her choice not to come. Does anyone have advice? Are the first few days after birth a good enough reason to stick to what makes me comfortable, even if it upsets her? I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone, but I'm struggling. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong, and definitely not in the wrong. You have every right to make the decision that is best for you, especially when you are going through such a major life event like having a baby. Your Mael is being unreasonable. You want them to see the baby, and you have arranged for another equally acceptable place to stay. Hold firm to your decision, and I think MIL will change her mind as she's basically giving you a ridiculous ultimatum. You're not in the wrong. Tell your husband that he needs to handle his mother. The stress this is causing you is incredibly dangerous for you and the baby. Her tantrum is quite literally physically harming you. If she wants to sulk and spoil this experience for herself, she can go ahead and do that, but please don't let her spoil it for you. Ignore her and focus on getting ready for motherhood. Nothing else matters. My husband is supportive and says it's my decision. Wait, did he say this to your MIL? Because if so, he has thrown you under the bus in a way that you shouldn't be okay with. Have him read the lemon clot essay so he can understand exactly how challenging postpartum can be. He should be protecting you from his mother, not telling her that you're the reason she can't stay in the house. And he needs to ensure that she doesn't spin a false narrative around the family that you're stopping her from meeting the baby. She is very welcome to meet the baby. She just isn't going to be sleeping under your roof while she does it. She is choosing not to meet the baby until you comply with her demands. Do not give in. This is a power trip, and you have to win it or she will boss you around forever. You're not in the wrong. You are your own best protector, and you're doing a great job. You need to look after your own viability, and having visitors and guests when you just had a baby is just foolish. In fact, it's recommended you go a number of weeks before you even let other people come by and see the baby. The old saying that family comes first, it's usually always the person saying it that comes first. And it's never you. It's gaslighting 101. Real family does not impose on other people, doesn't cost them anything, only helps. Glad you have a good spouse, typically per Ann Landers and things like that. Each person in a relationship manages their side of the family. You married your spouse, not their family. I'm of the attitude that parents owe their children everything, but the children owe their parents nothing. Parents chose to have you, and they owe you a good start in life. Children don't ask to be born, and they don't know their parents a thing for their upper end. All there is choice. You can choose to engage with your parents or his parents, but it's on your terms, not theirs. Sometimes parents still think they're the boss. They dictate when Christmas is going to happen, and who's going to come, and how it's going to work. Even to adults, I strongly encourage you from a very young age to build your own home traditions. That means having holidays and Christmas at your house with your small family, and visiting relatives when and if you choose, and how you choose. Don't feel obliged. You take little tiny babies out into public to show them off. That's the public demanding it, not you wanting it. Don't succumb. Nest away, bond with that baby, have minimal distractions. It's not your job to give your or his relatives their baby fix. They can wait until the kid's old enough and safe enough. And also be sure that no one ever comes by that isn't fully vaccinated. And if there's anybody out there who's anti-vax, well, then they're anti-baby, and you're not going to let them see the baby except on Zoom. Next up, a couple of months ago, I and 5 of my friends planned a holiday together for Berlin. One of my friends, let's call him James, decided it would be easier if he booked all of the accommodation and we sent him the money for it. We all agreed to this, and I planned to pay for it at the end of the month after I had gotten paid. However, a week before the trip was to begin, I was no longer able to attend. However, I promised to pay in full for my part. However, this is where my other friend, Peter, gets involved. He was part of the original planning of the trip, but decided he could not afford it, and was thus not included in the booking. However, once he heard that I was unable to attend, but still paying for the room James had booked, he said he wanted to go. Naturally, everyone agreed that he could, and so I didn't pay for my part, assuming that Peter would cover it. He did not. The trip went off without a hitch. However, upon return, James asked me when I was going to be able to pay him back. I was confused because I hadn't gone on the trip and said that it was Peter's responsibility, which made Peter very upset. He said that because I had agreed to go on the trip and had canceled with such short notice, that it was my job to pay for it, as if he hadn't decided to go, the room would have been empty and a waste of money. He argued that because I make more money than him and he couldn't afford to pay for the accommodation, it was my fault and I shouldn't have planned the trip if I couldn't keep my promises. I would have no problem paying James for the money he spent on the room if it had remained empty. But the fact that Peter saw that as his chance to have a cheaper holiday is causing me to refuse. As a result of this, James is no longer talking to either of us, saying he will once we can start acting like adults and someone pays him the money. Am I in the wrong? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. You agreed to pay if you were attending, and also for the room when you couldn't attend after it was booked. That is more than fair. You didn't agree to subsidize Peter. Peter is really not a decent friend. It's pretty bold of him to expect he doesn't have to pay, given the others going were paying. He has in effect slighted everyone involved. You, because he's expecting you to pay for something he used. Your friend organizing, because they are now out money they shouldn't be. And the others who attended because they've had to pay for the holiday. But Peter thinks he is special and gets things for free. You're not in the wrong. You'd have paid so that nobody was out money for your empty room. Since the room was not empty, the obligation was just sort of shifted from you to Peter. Why should he get a free vacation? Madness. Peter is such a cheapskate idiot here. You're not in the wrong. Your obligation to pay ended when Peter opted in. But you should have chimed in with well, if Peter is now going, that ends my obligation to pay for my late cancellation. And all of this could have been avoided. Next up, my ex, 35, had custody of our daughter, 9. Until I discovered that my ex was neglecting my daughter by using drugs and living in horrific conditions. I won custody of my daughter when she was 7. Her mother was a heavy meth user for a long time. I came to find out. She hid it from nearly everyone, and of the time I suspected it, I didn't have proof until I came across video evidence of it on my daughter's tablet. During our custody battle, my ex got clean. I was very happy about this, as I wanted my daughter to have her mother in her life. My ex got a job making good money, moved away from her abusive meth head dealer boyfriend, and was finally trying to make something of herself. Well, the last few months, my ex was finally allowed unsupervised visits. Every visit there was a ton of drama. She was late picking up our daughter, 16 hours late once. She slept for 24 hours straight, leaving our daughter to fend for herself for food. Our daughter had to call her grandma to pick her up because she couldn't wake up mommy. She lost her job due to being sick. She constantly has an excuse for why she is late or unavailable. She once had a friend bring my daughter back in a car that had a breathalyzer in it to keep it running. I discovered this guy had 5 warrants out for his arrest due to meth. This last visit, however, is where I think I might have been the idiot. My ex was 4 hours late picking up our daughter, yet again, and then had a 2-hour drive back to where she lives. I checked my daughter's phone GPS to see if she had made it to her mother's safely, only to discover they weren't even halfway there yet. Her mother stopped at a random gas station off the interstate for 2 hours and left our daughter alone in the car. I couldn't believe it when I talked to my daughter on the phone. So of course I called the police to do a welfare check. Before the police could arrive, I checked with my daughter again to see if her mother had returned. She had. I relayed this information to dispatch. They still chased her down. All I was told is that my daughter was okay. After my daughter returned from visitation, she told my wife about the incident. This is where I feel terrible. Daughter said the police put her in the back of the squad car as her mother and car were searched. She was terrified. That was never my intention. I just wanted to make sure she was safe, because I was 99% sure there was some sort of drug deal use going down, especially with recent behavior. Her lawyer even withdrew from counsel this week after a drug test was ordered. My suspicions are through the roof. So, am I in the wrong? Edit. Some are under the assumption that I haven't fought tooth and nail for 2 years to keep sole custody of my daughter. The battle is still ongoing, but am not a mother, so therefore I am treated as less in family court. Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. While your daughter may have been scared, her safety comes first. Police oftentimes have events where they do meet and greet with people, where they also get to see a police car and all that. Maybe see if you can replace what she experienced with police with a more positive experience. You're not in the wrong. It sounds exactly like a drug deal was going down. And since there is no field sobriety test for meth, they probably couldn't do anything to prove there was drug use. But what else could mother have been doing for 2 hours at a random gas station? Just by the first paragraph, no, OP, you are not the idiot. Prioritize your daughter's safety over a scary experience. A little fright will stay with you for a couple years, but conditions like that will leave mental scars far beyond the next decade. Pat yourself on the back. Next up, my husband, 36mers, and his sister, 38F, were born and raised in Africa. They immigrated to America as older teens as young adults, so they have no experience growing up in the U.S. Recently, my SIL was upset because her son, 10 Metis, has recently started asking to go by an American English name. His name is a very traditional name from her and my husband's culture, and it has no standard counterpart in English. Apparently, my nephew has been teased for his weird name and just wants a normal name to fit in. She asked me what I thought because I grew up in the U.S. with a foreign name. I, 35F, was born and raised in the U.S. to immigrant parents from an European country. My name is from their country native language, but it has an English counterpart. Think like Elizabeth. So I tended to use the American version in school, so my classmates and teachers could pronounce it. I told my SIL to let my nephew use the new American name/nickname so he wouldn't be teased. She got upset because his name has a lot of meaning, and she doesn't want him to be ashamed of his background and culture. She said I wouldn't understand because my name came from a white country, and we live in a fairly white area, so people are more accepting of it. I just think that why he should be proud of his name and culture. Kids suck, and sometimes it's just better to go along to get along. That she let him use new name to not be teased and wait until he is more mature to understand why he should love his name. Am I in the wrong for telling her that? I don't know if people care or not, but I have a small update. I have to share because I am just so proud of my nephew. He sat his mom down and showed her a list of names that he liked. He showed her what they all meant and how the meanings related to his actual name, so that he would still honor his name's meaning. Isn't he just so smart? My CL was still against the idea, lol, but she has warmed up to the idea of him going by his initials. Apparently a new friend of his sometimes refers to him by initials already. I doubt there'll be anything worth updating after this. I wish we could have had a warm Hallmark moment where my nephew teaches his bullies about his culture and everyone hugs it out at the end. But alas, life is more complicated. This all has generated a lot of conversations between my husband and I as well, since I recently found out I was pregnant, about raising mixed-race culture children in today's world. Let's start judging. No one is in the wrong, but personally, I would be more concerned about addressing the bullying. If someone gets bullied for freckles, should they try to have them removed? If someone gets bullied for their hair color, should they dye it? If someone gets bullied for being smart, should they act dumb or get worse grades? A child shouldn't be taught to change themselves to make bullies happy. And racist. White children shouldn't be taught their behavior is okay. If the child wants to go by a shortened version of his name, that is normal and fine. But to take on a new American name to appease bullies doesn't actually make sense to me, and seems like encouraging the wrong behavior in the child and the bullies. This should definitely be addressed with the school, and these children should be held accountable for their bullying. I wouldn't say idiot, but as a Black American, I don't agree. White Americans always make fun of Black and brown people's names, no matter how ethnic or not it sounds. By changing his name, she would be indirectly teaching him to give in to peer pressure, that fitting in is more important than being your authentic self, and to mold yourself for the white gaze. Yet another situation where Black-brown people have to change themselves so we aren't harassed, instead of teaching and holding white people accountable for their actions. Why is it that that boy has to change when he did nothing wrong but exist? Why is the conversation not about holding his bullies accountable and standing up for what's right? Us, Black Americans, have to learn about racism and how to navigate in America without getting harmed and/or killed from a really young age. These are things he's going to have to learn soonish. It's something you'll probably never truly understand and won't need to because of how American society works. You're not in the wrong. Your advice is based on your own personal experience, which is exactly what your Sael asked for. That she did not like it is not your fault.